Thank you for waiting to the last talk of the day. I'm Anisha Narang and I've been working with Red Hat for nearly 2 years now. I mostly do test automation for web applications. So today I'm going to talk about the testing of web applications, which tools we can use to test the web applications, how do we go about testing the web applications, how can we start with it. Web application testing. Web application testing is about validating the user flow and checking the functionality of the application. Some of the cases like that whether the links on the page redirect to the correct page, or if there are forms, do they behave correctly, or the content present on the page is correct or not. Also, we verify some of the end-to-end user flows. Also including some of the negative scenarios. That if a user inputs some invalid data, a correct error should be displayed, which notifies the user to input the valid data. Such are the test cases we cover while we are doing web application testing. Automation versus manual. Test automation is nothing but the use of a testing tool to control the execution of tests. Now suppose today you have a web application which is pretty small and you think that you can just test it manually. But what if your application increases in size tomorrow and there are too many features in edge case scenarios where you may be required to click through manually? Now this will involve a lot of time. It will increase your regression time as well. So these are the places where test automation comes into the picture. There are a couple of open source as well as commercial tools which are available with which we can do automation. But we need to make sure that do not automate just for the sake of automating, or you're automating because you can automate. Or the other way, that you're doing manual tests continuously because you do not want to write any code. We need to decide and plan depending on our project and the test cases that which are the ones that we need to automate. Tools which help us do web application testing. There are a couple of tools like Selenium, Water, Sahi, which help us automate browsers and interact with the web elements present on the page. Also, there are a couple of commercial tools available with which we can do the web application testing. The most widely used is Selenium. Selenium, and how many of you have heard of the tool Selenium? Awesome, that's good. Selenium is an open source tool which automates browsers. It tests pages by loading them and performing certain actions on them, just as it's a person. It will simulate the actions of that of a user on a web application. It will perform certain clicks for you, fill up certain application forms available on the web page. It will do some assertions, and it will help you automate your process, save you on regression time. So one of the advantages with Selenium to get started is that Selenium Ide is a record and play tool, which allows you to record your test scripts.
So you mean I can do some interaction on the web browser and then it can record that interaction and convert it into a script, run automatically?
Yes, absolutely. So Selenium Ide is a record and play tool which helps to record your test scripts. So whatever transactions you perform on the page, they get recorded. Now what you can do is you just need to wait. It is available as a Firefox plugin. You install the plugin and you go ahead doing some user flows on your web page and it gets recorded as a script. The Selenium Ide also allows you to get started by converting your test script to any language with just a click of a button. You can convert the HTML script which is getting recorded in a Python format or in a Ruby format depending upon which language you want to get started with. Others. Water is what it stands for Web Application Testing in Ruby. It is a Ruby gem. The Water API is built as a wrapper around the Selenium 2.0 API. It is based on Selenium. It has a very friendly API. Since it's a Ruby gem, you need to use Ruby as a programming language to use Water WebDriver. Selenium is one tool which can be controlled by many programming languages and testing frameworks. One of the advantages I find with Selenium Water is that I do not have to worry about element locators like XPath or CSS selectors. We'll be going forward and seeing what is the comparison between the codes for both of them. Capybara is another Ruby gem. It has a very intuitive API that mimics the language a human would use. Something like, if there is an email, then there is the method provided like fill an email with password, which helps you to write code easily. Securely is another tool which uses image recognition to identify elements on the page. Which programming language to use? You can choose a programming language of your choice. If you're comfortable with Python, you can go ahead and use Python as your language and write your test scripts, or Ruby or Java, whichever language you are comfortable with. Now, before we go see some code, I just want to I will make you familiar with an application and how do we start writing a text script. I'm sure all of you might have used a pastebin some or the other time, some sort of pastebin. So this is the Fedora pastebin. So the basic functionality of this application is that we input some text here, we click on the paste button, and our pastebin gets created. So this is the basic functionality. Now we'll see how can we automate and write code for testing this functionality. So the first step is to interact with the elements. The first step is to input some text in this text box. So how do we know that which element on the page we need to interact with? So what we do is we go here, we use some inspector element, and we see that this text area has an ID which is page data. Can all of you see that? So now we know that this text area available on this page is associated with an ID which is unique on a page. The next step should be to click on this button. We go here, we click on this button, and again we see that this button also has an ID which is page button. So now we're done with two steps, interacting with the elements. We go here. Now here our action is to assert. What we do is we go here again on this text, we do a right click and we do an inspect element. But here we see that I do not find any substantial element name with which I can interact. It's contained in a div which has a style. It does not have an attribute name or class or anything like that. So what I do is I go a level above. I scroll up and I find that this div is contained a part of the div, parent div, which has a class text. So now I will interact with this element using the parent div element. Now we go here and we see some code. So on the left you see the Selenium WebDriver Python code, and on the right we have written the same script using the Water WebDriver. This is in Ruby pattern and this is in Python. So what we do, the first line says from Selenium import WebDriver, which will import all the WebDriver implementations, and we import the keys class to simulate the keys which are there on the keyboard, so that the WebDriver can input the keys on behalf of the user. Parallelly, we see that we require Ruby gems. We require the Water WebDriver gem which we're using. RSpec is another gem which RSpec API provides us to have to match the expected outcomes. Next line simulates a real user opening a Firefox browser with the parallel sides here. The next step is to open the URL of the application. So on that side we have use a get method to open the URL, which is fpage.org, and here it's the goto method. So the concept remains the same, but the syntax and the API differs, the DSL. Now we need to interact with the elements once we've opened the browser. We use find element by ID, paste data. We just saw that the text area had an ID, and we send the keys sample text here. On the paddle side, we use doc text area ID paste data. So here in the parenthesis is a key value pair where the key is the name of the attribute and the value is the value of the attribute, which was ID. So there we used method like find element by ID. Selenium Python bindings provide us with a lot of find element by locators with which we can interact with the elements present on the web page. And here this API we find the name of the element, like if it's a text area, if it's a button, if it's a text box, if it's a link, and we again send the keys. Now our next action is to click on the button. We perform a click on the button. Similarly, we find element by class name now. Sorry, this one was for ID, paste button, and we perform a click action with the method click. The next is to make an assertion for the text. For the text that we have entered, should be same as what we have input. We find the element by class name, which was text, as we saw, and here, so here you see that we can mention the type of the element, which is like div here. So we say div colon class text. We mention the key value pair as specified. Should equal to the sample text here. Yes. So we do an assertion here that the text that we've got should be equal to the text that I've entered. If there's a failure, my test case would fail. If it matches, my test case would pass. And here we use the assert equal method to match the text entered. There we contain the text in a variable, and then we're matching text entered should equal to the sample text here. If it does not matches, it will give an error saying text mismatch. And the last, we close the browser. So this is a very small script we've written to test the basic functionality of f-based.org. And we've seen how we can write the code using any of the languages. Choose your element locators wisely. It's very important to choose the element locators wisely. The safest option is to choose an ID if available, because you know that an ID is unique on the page. Next, you can interact with the element using a class name or using a tag name, link text, partial link text. But I would say that do not use the text as the element locator. Suppose a particular link with the name OK or a button, the text OK changes to continue tomorrow. There's a possibility that your test might fail. You will need to modify the text once the new iteration is released, if the UI developer has made some changes to it. So it's always advisable to use the elements which can be interacted with, or there's very less probability for them to get changed. Choose a testing framework. Now you saw the application. Now you just saw the sample code for the application. For one script it was. Now what if your application is big? You cannot just go on writing 100 scripts or 50 scripts and manage them. You need to have a testing framework to manage all the tests. A testing framework helps you to control the execution of tests. It allows you to organize your tests better. You can maintain consistency, help you to generate reports in whichever format you want to you would like to see the test reports. So these are some of the testing frameworks that you can use. The latter are the BDD frameworks. We'll just go through one of them. Py.test Python testing framework. Unit test is unit test Python. The unit test module as available in Python. Nose is again a Python framework. Test unit is a testing framework available for Ruby. TestNG, JUnit are similarly parallel to for Java. Cucumber is a behavior-driven development tool. It's a Ruby gem. So Cucumber we can use with respect to testing for behavior-driven testing. Behavior-driven testing is a companion to BDD. So test-driven development says that you write your code test first and the application code afterwards. But what if you can just describe the behavior of your application in plain text? So how about that you are able to write the test that we just performed in plain English, saying when I go to fbase.org and I input some text, then I should see the same text. It's more readable and very clear that what are we actually testing. Lettuce. Using Lettuce, you can map your code to Python. It is a similar tool to Cucumber. Using JBehave, you can map your code to Java. This is again a similarly BDD tool. Now, some of the points to remember. Keep your code dry. Do not repeat yourself. Make proper methods, proper libraries, modules, so that a particular step or a particular method does not get repeated every time. A login function, you can create a method and keep it in a separate file, and you can reuse that code again and again, so that there's no code repetition. Are you putting your code to sleep? So this is one of the very commonly done things by most of the people who write tests for web applications. Elements always take time to appear on the page because of the network latency. So all the elements like Water WebDriver or Selenium, they provide an implicit timeout for 30 seconds for the elements to appear on the page. And so what happens is, mostly the QA developers, they put additional sleep time, sleep for 10 seconds, sleep for 5 seconds, so that the test don't fail. That's not a good approach. Because anything which is taking more than 30 seconds, any element which is taking more than 30 elements to appear on the page is not going to give you a good user experience. I hope all of you agree. Or you like to wait for more than 30 seconds for any element to appear on the page or any data to appear on the page.
Do not do that.
Yeah. Choose your element locators carefully. We just saw. Organize your code well. You need to organize your code into methods and into features. If you're using Cucumber, it gets very easy for you to organize your code because you can make subfolders for your features and for your step definitions and things like that. Now I'll give you a quick demo of Cucumber and Water WebDriver. How much time do I have?
You have another 10 minutes? 12 minutes maybe. Cucumber.
See here, when I say organize your code well, you can always, put the right files in the right folders. If you look at the folder structure here, you can see a config folder which is there, which will contain all the config files. So this project is using Cucumber, which is again a Ruby gem, and we're using the Water WebDriver gem, which is a Ruby gem. So this is the format that we follow. So there is a features folder where you put all the features of your web application, that whatever you want to test. So here I have a base.feature. Inside there's a step definitions folder where you map your features to the actual code. How are things working? The code that we just saw, we have that code at the right locations. We have an environment or RB file where we do all the initializations required, like launching of the web browser, initial steps that are required to be done. Gem file just specifies that what all gems are to be mentioned. Then there's a reports folder, there's a screenshot folder. So screenshot folder is basically for if a test case fails, if there is not appropriate code which is being mapped, a screenshot is being taken and it's being displayed. So let's see how it works. I think I need to show you the file. So this is how the feature files for Cucumber looks like. We've clearly written everything that we're doing in the test in plain text. To be able to paste the snippet of text on FA successfully, my scenario says to verify that I can paste the snippet of text. Given that I'm on the home page, when I input text and I click on the paste button, then a new paste should be created with the same text. And how do we map our code here using Cucumber? So now these are the steps. This is the step definition file. Here we map the code exactly. Given that I'm on the home page, I navigate to the URL. I input the text in the next step. I click on the button. I verify that if whatever text that I've entered should be the same, and it should pass the text or else fail. It's the same code that we just saw. We execute the code. And so this is using Cucumber that we just saw, but if you just want to execute the plain script that we've written, you can execute like this. So the browser is opening, the text has been entered, and it has been verified. We just executed the plain script, which did not give us any indication of passing or failing. It passed because there is no error. So this is what the comparison is. How we bring DDT to use, and what we see when we just write a simple script. There are a couple of other output formats which Cucumber provides you to generate the reports. We specify the format to be HTML, and we specify the output report to be report.html. So this was the report which got created. This is an HTML report format, which will again give you a description that how your tests were, what your tests were, whether they passed or failed. If the test failed, you will definitely see a red line, which will give you a clear indication. Now comes the integration to Jenkins. You can integrate your test to Jenkins, continuous integration. And so we do a build now, and our build is started. There are a couple of plugins that you need to use when you have to integrate your tests to Jenkins. Like there's a Cucumber JVM reports plugin which is available, so you can easily integrate your code. And if you're using Ruby, so you need to set up, you can use the RVM environment plugin to manage the Ruby versions. So here when you see the reports, Cucumber reports, you see some fancy reports with a clear description of how many percentage, what percent of tests pass, what percent of tests fail. And if you are really interested in knowing about the screenshot thing that I mentioned, I will just show you that. This is one of the test cases which failed. So here we go to the Cucumber reports and we see that there were 25% of the steps which failed, and the number of scenarios which failed was 100% because we're just including one scenario here. And when we go here, we see that the test failed and there's a screenshot behind. So the test failed because if on F-pace, if we create a pace within 5 intervals a second, the new pace does not get created. So we see the message here, please keep an interval of 5 seconds between your pace. This is the error that we got, and the screenshot, if we really want to verify, this is what happened while we were running our test. And hence our test case did not pass. That's how it works. That's it. Any questions?
Any questions?
The elements on the page which you are passing, can I also make them dynamically pass? Like, if I am writing a test case, if I'm doing something, I want that to be reusable because I can use the same thing for other pages as well. So, can I pass the name of the text box in runtime? Like, can I do something like that?
In runtime.
Like, I don't want to hardcode the name of the text box because it's the same file I can use for testing another web page.
So you can parameterize, right? You can mention all the elements that you want to pass at your runtime. Maybe in the environment. I'm not sure about passing in the runtime, but you can always specify them in the environment file. Because somewhere or the other you'll have to mention.
Yeah, environment file should be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Environment file should be okay because from there you can pass the variables.
Yeah.
Yes. So that is the same way the way I pass. So you make a config file and you load all the text. So this is how the browser variable is being passed and being used everywhere.
Do Selenium and Water support other browsers? Like,
Sorry?
do these tools support other browsers besides Firefox?
Yes. They can support Chrome, Firefox, Safari.
You need to download extra stuff, but it's actually quite straightforward.
Also, whenever you are integrating to Jenkins, you mostly use the Headless Browser, and the Headless Browser that I used for this one was Phantom.js. So it simulates the actual, like a real browser. It's a Headless Browser. And it is faster even as compared to the actions as performed in the real browser. So it cuts down on the time taken for your build to run.
Sometimes too fast.
Yeah, sometimes too fast, you can say that.
Yeah, it doesn't wait for elements render too fast or the page gets dismissed too fast, and you just why is it crashing for funny reasons. So yeah, it's.
So for this, if it's going too fast, you can always use methods like wait until present, so that even if it's taking like minimal 5 seconds, it will wait for 5 seconds.
I suspect it's the way that we wrote the code because we wrote our own wait until instead of using capybara's wait until, so it's kind of crashing.
But that wait until present has an implicit timeout of 30 seconds, so it will not wait for more than 30 seconds.
Yeah, it does. So sometimes there are times where it crashed, but the test code is still waiting for the response. It's damn lame. Damn lame.
No.
So can you use this tool to brute force some login page?
Yes, you can use.
Can for performance testing, I suppose you can do this. I have friends who have used Capybara for some e-commerce websites. I should not name names. You do do have a Twitter account.
Any other questions? If you have any questions, you can always ask me, Anisha.
So you were saying that like a lot of sites these days are dynamic, like a lot of content gets loaded asynchronously. So any best practice like when you're writing tests? Because you need to load the content to load before you
Yes. So for the elements to load on the page, you can always use the wait until present, and which is an implicit time on the. I think I've covered it. Answered the question already.
No, but sometimes the page can load a lot of things, right? So many good practices that is good for scalable.
So you can always dive down to the parent element of the page. There might be a bigger iframe or div which might be containing all the elements of the page. So you can always do a wait until that element to appear on the page, so that your test doesn't run faster than all the elements which appear on the page. Was that your question?
You just make it like sometimes the page is very complicated items. It's not just like this element is present. You can wait to read all the images load and then you have then you can to the next page.
Yeah, so you can always, you need to interact with the element of the page, or whichever element you want to write the test for.
Sometimes it's too difficult to do it at the interaction level. You might want to think about writing a unit test one level lower. See, it's a bit like some Ajax-y frameworks like Angular or something. Sometimes things just doesn't happen the way you want it. So you want to bring one level lower into integration test or the unit test level. Suggestion.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you.